Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the January 25th work session of the City Council. And I am going to open this by turning it over to Glenn Klein.
Thank you. The Measure 49 claim that you recently heard, the parties have indicated, the claimant and the people who are opposing it have indicated an interest in trying to come up with a resolution that's a win-win. And so they have asked for some additional time. In order to make that happen, what I need you to do is to pass a motion putting the Measure 49 claim on hold. It likely will come back to you right after your spring recess, where I can update you and tell you that either they have worked out a resolution and the claim has been dropped, they need a little more time, in which case we'll keep the claim on hold, or they haven't been able to work out a resolution and they want it to go forward, at which point you can then establish new dates for keeping the record open. So the motion that I would like the council president to put on the table is to move to put on hold the Measure 49 claim.
Yes.
So there's deadlines associated with Measure 49s. Does this push that out, or does it fit within it?
The claimant has given us an additional 60 days, which was the minimum I told him we needed because of your upcoming break. And so he said, okay, we'll give you an additional 60 days. So yes, it puts those deadlines out. So we have time to come back after your break if necessary, get the additional testimony. You'll still have time for a work session and then action.
Good. I move to postpone the Measure 49 claim.
Second.
And by postpone, I think you meant to put it on hold.
I move to put the Measure 49 claim on hold.
Table it?
No.
No, just put it on, or suspend or put it on hold.
On hold. Suspend or put it on hold. Okay.
I second what you said.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor? Claire?
I vote yes.
All, that's 8 in favor. 7. We're missing Greg. 7 in favor. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Good. Now we can go on to the consent calendar.
I move to put the consent calendar on hold.
Second.
Withdraw that.
I wanted to pull item E for recognition because I have a problem about it.
Okay.
C, please. Full C.
We'll see.
Actually, I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, and discussion. And then that's the poll, right? We'll C and E.
We vote on the rest.
And we vote on the rest? Okay. All in favor of the consent calendar? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Claire?
I vote yes.
7 in favor. Thank you all. Okay, so now we can discuss item C, initiation of Metro Plan Amendment, Parks and Recreation Facilities.
I only pulled that because I see some staff here that I think might be able to just help me understand that line item a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, Neil Bjorklund can do that.
So are you looking just for an overview, or you
Initiation Metro Plan Amendment, Parks and Recreation Facilities element. Help me understand how that fits in the context of what we're doing going forward, and the fact that we have no plan at the moment that is approved.
So generally, and then if you want to jump in, Catherine, as well. So the way it relates to the plan that we're in the development process for is, right now the Metro Plan sort of lays out a specific way that it must be adopted. And this amendment would allow us the flexibility to adopt it a little differently. And the way that it constrains us is, it says it has to be adopted basically as part of the Metro Plan, as a refinement to the Metro Plan, and adopted as land use policy. Whereas the plan that we're bringing forward to you, that we've been describing for these months and that we're building, doesn't include any land use policies or constraints. And so our hope is to adopt it as a aspirational plan.
Will we, excuse my voice, I'm still somewhat recovering here. Will we have, as a part of the finishing parts of Envision Eugene and a new comp plan, will we have a new parks plan then that will be subject to approval in the same way the previous one was not? Or will we have a new form for the parks plan?
Go ahead.
So the reason why we don't have the PROS comprehensive plan is not adopted in place is because of the LUBA remand. The LUBA remand was, in 2006, was based on this Metro plan provision that said, you know, it needs to be, the provisions of the plan need to be applicable and used in the local development processes. And the parks comprehensive plan was was written and intended to be aspirational. So that's why since the LUBA remand, there just hasn't been one in place. So what this would do is initiate the Metro Plan amendment to say you can adopt a PROS comprehensive plan that is aspirational, that doesn't apply within the local development process. The parks plan that you've been hearing about, that's still going forward, and this allows it to be adopted as it's written and intended.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. My understanding of the remand in '06 was based on some objections from some local residents and local parties. I have not had the opportunity to have any visit with some of the people who I'm familiar with who were a part of that objection and that LUBA agreed with about this change and its impacts. And so I'm a little concerned about moving forward without the opportunity to do that. Is there a time-sensitive nature to this approval?
The time sensitivity is that we want to be clear on what processes are available to us to adopt before we come back this spring. So we don't know the exact date, but I think we have a work session in March, and then sometime May-ish, we'll come back with a plan for adoption. So the Metro Plan Amendment process will take some months to complete.
So this is step one in a series of other processes where there's adequate time for us to adjust if there's concern. Do I have that right?
Yes, and it's initiating this is just to initiate the process to start it. It's not approving removal of it. That process will still roll out. This is just to initiate.
We're heading in this direction. We may have some concerns, but we're heading this way. Okay.
Yeah, the process includes a work session, hearing before the Planning Commission, their recommendation, then a work session and hearing before the council, and then you would take action. So
that satisfies my concern. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
Any other discussion on this?
I just wanted to point out the type of dedicated employees that we have in our
Yes.
in the city of Eugene. Even though Neil had retired a couple of months ago, here he sits,
Yes, he did.
finishing off.
What a guy.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we need a motion now to,
It's already on.
it's already on the
It's already on
table?
the table.
Okay, oh, that's right, it's already on the table.
Motion approved
So
item
we-
C.
You just said
All in favor? 1, 2, Claire?
I vote yes.
All in favor? That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And now, consideration of E, adoption of Resolution 5180 authorizing the city manager to enter an agreement regarding fiber optic. We have a motion.
Oh, I wanted to pull this, not because I had a problem with it, because I think it's significant, and sometimes things get lost in the consent agenda. This is, maybe city manager, you could speak to this a little bit better, but it's the first step in moving one of the first steps of moving the high-speed fiber in the downtown forward, and a pretty big one in terms of going after a U.S. Department of Commerce grant in cooperation with eWeb. And one other point that many people have asked, gee, $3 million isn't either, some people think that's an enormous amount of money, or some people say, how can you do that for that money? On the latter part, the existing conduit that eWeb has downtown is where we're pulling the fiber. So all that infrastructure already exists. So just pulling the fiber is relatively inexpensive to get what we're getting. And maybe Mr. City Manager mentioned last night at the event that we're one of the first cities in the country that will have this kind of capability.
Yeah, just to build on that, I would say it's, eWebs is a great partner. LCOG's been a great partner. The Technology Association of Oregon's been a great partner and all in trying to create this high-speed fiber. And Fifield can talk about some of the details of what the fiber does. I just know it makes it go really fast. Your data, and you put large amounts of data through it. And for people like Matt Sayer with the TAO, it's an opportunity to really double or triple the numbers of sort of tech-related employees in and around our downtown, which would be fabulous for us continuing. And my understanding, it really is only a handful of cities around the country that will have this kind of capability at this time.
Right. One of the things that we found out when we were discussing this was that the speed at which people can access information was actually cutting back or they were cutting back or not able to add as many jobs as they wanted, and this will be able to add more jobs in the downtown core area to be able to handle, with this new speed, to be able to handle that workload.
And what I would say, it also positions us not just in the downtown core area, but the capacity and the capability actually is able to now spread further into the community, which also is a huge benefit.
Right, spurs off of it. Exactly.
Any other, Mike?
Thank you. Yes, I agree, and congratulations for moving ahead in this way with this. I started pushing this as a part of the urban renewal discussion stuff last fall because of the folks and the partners at the table that impressed upon me at the time the work they'd already done and how important this was to economic development in the community. And I wanted to highlight this as well and say, good job, excellent that we're going after this. Hope it goes well. And I'm glad we're doing the development as part of urban renewal either way. But I think that we should be having an even further conversation now that we're a leader in the country in what will be possible in our downtown core to look at what might be available for us to do, even perhaps say we had some unexpected revenues of some nature, that we might look at what it might cost for us to expand this further into the community, especially since any monies brought in from a telecommunications company might fit well into expanding fiber into our community as their source. I think that we would see an increase in the capacity of our schools and the capacity of our libraries and our public services, as well as what the local economy can do outside of the downtown core for us to expand this to our limits and really lead the country on it. So I think we talk about that further.
Okay, now do I need a motion? Oh, we have
It's already on
Emily.
Maybe a little bit aside, but I'm wondering how the spurs would work. It's my understanding you need underground utility conduits to put the fiber through it. So, I don't have a map of where the underground conduits are, but I'd like to know how the spurs would work and how they would reach.
Maybe I'll ask Ann to come up and talk a little bit more about that.
Hi, I'm Ann Fifield in the Community Development Division, and the planned area that we're funding with this project is in the downtown core where utilities are undergrounded, but as the ability to spur out, it's the electrical lines that we're utilizing. They come out of the ground. As you walk around the downtown, you'll see where there's utilities have not been undergrounded. There's poles above ground, and it can come out along those poles. And eWeb now will string. They have a fiber backbone that goes around the community, connecting all of their substations, and private parties are able to connect into that fiber network if they're able to pay for it. It depends on where you are, how much it costs. This will expand that footprint, diminishing costs to reach it beyond the downtown.
And you don't have to have underground.
No. The rest of the community where it's strung along the poles.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments? All right, are we ready for a vote? All in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Claire? Claire?
Sorry, my phone locked up on me. I vote yes.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so that passes.
Bueller.
All right. The next action item, I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is an action item on an ordinance on leasing marijuana facilities, Glassroots. And Glassroots is a glass shop at 5th and Blair. They've requested that council adopt an ordinance per state statute that would allow issuance of a new recreational marijuana license at their location. The business is closer than 1,000 feet to a school when measured in a straight line. This is a state minimum, but there is about 1,200 feet when measured along the pedestrian route. The public hearing was held last Tuesday, January 17th. A community member representing Glassroots spoke in favor of the ordinance, and a community member spoke in opposition. Last month, the council adopted a similar ordinance for Turpentine Station on River Road, and this item is scheduled for action today.
We have a motion.
Yeah. I move to adopt Council Bill 5163, an ordinance allowing a new recreational marijuana facility to locate less than 1,000 feet from Looking Glass News Road School.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? No discussion. I guess we're ready to vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Claire?
I vote yes.
Great. Passes 8-0. Okay. On to the next one. City manager?
Thank you, Mayor. This has to do with a resolution annexing land to the city. And this item is a request to annex approximately 1.65 acres of vacant residential land located north of the intersection of East 30th Avenue and Spring Boulevard. Annexation will allow for future development consistent with the property's low-density residential designation and the Eugene Code. Typically, annexation requests are placed on the City Council's consent agenda. In this case, public testimony from an adjoining property owner has suggested that the Council hold a public hearing on this annexation due to concerns related to access and utilities. Staff have confirmed that the property subject to the annexation can be provided with a minimum level of key urban facilities without crossing the adjoining property owner's property. Furthermore, any future development proposal beyond a single-family residence on the property will require a land use application, including the opportunity for additional public review and appeal.
I have a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution 5183, which approves the proposed annexation request consistent with the applicable approved criteria.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion, Alan?
Yeah, this happens to be in my ward, and Mr. Holleran, who's the neighbor, sent an email, which, by the way, is not the best way to communicate with me either. And in that, he expressed some concerns about the easement. It wasn't granting utility easement, but my understanding is that the utility easement can be granted on the city's right-of-way and does not present a problem or an inability to then develop the property.
Thank you. Nicholas Joyello, Planning Division, Associate Planner. We've given you some evidence from both the applicant's engineer and also the Public Works Department that the right-of-way adjacent to this property on the west side, it's about 60 feet wide, can provide services that can connect up to Central Boulevard.
And that on the map that you guys handed out, that's the hatched area to the
west.
To the west or
Yes.
to the left.
Exactly.
So the easement for utilities can come through there, as well as, is that where the driveway would go for this development potentially?
Potential road connection, we've had some preliminary discussion. It's pretty obvious based on the terrain that it will have to come from the south to get to this property. It's most likely too steep to meet road standards to connect to Central Boulevard.
Right, that was my next question. Is there any plan to connect it to 30th or Central?
Not at this time, yeah.
All right. So there's not any inability to develop this land
Correct.
Because of utility easements. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion on this? We're ready for a vote? All in favor? Claire?
I vote yes.
All right, passes 8-0. Thank you. Okay, city manager, next up.
Next item is an ordinance on the rental housing code. And the ordinance in front of council tonight adds language to the rental housing code to address carbon monoxide alarms, electrical systems, appliances, and rats. The ordinance removes the sunset clause and adds language requiring the city manager to review the code program, the rental housing code program, and report to council every 3 years. If no further action is taken, the code's ordinance will sunset on March 1st of this year and be repealed.
Have a motion?
I move to adopt Council Bill 5162, an ordinance amending the rental housing code.
Second?
All right, any discussion? I have Mike in the queue, and then Betty, and George, and Alan,
Chris.
and Chris.
Claire, you want to be in?
Claire, you want to be in the queue?
Not at this moment, thanks.
Okay, all right.
I have an amendment, and if I get a second, I will speak to it. I move to add a new section 7 to the ordinance to delete Eugene Code 8.440.
I'll second that for discussion.
Thank you. The function of deleting section 8.440 is to delete the $10 fee from the code, the authority to charge and collect the fee. We heard during testimony that this program has, over the last several years, had a total budget for staff time involved of about $300,000, but we know that there's been actually a surplus each year, so that there's a $280, whatever, almost $300,000 surplus. So the real cost is closer to $200,000 of the staff time each year to do this work. We've also heard testimony that up to half of the calls and maybe a good chunk of the time that staff spends on this is spent directly on the efforts involved in billing and answering billing questions. So it occurs to me that without the need to do that and to put this in the general fund, it should cost something in the neighborhood of 100, 150 grand to the budget to be able to do this on an ongoing basis. And with that, I would say two things. One, I agree with this service as somebody who likes smaller government on a larger scale. On a smaller scale at the local level, I think I believe in more energetic government, and a local enforcement mechanism for this important service. It seems reasonable to me. Seems like a good thing, and seems like something we should continue to do. And I think that most of the objections we hear aren't about the enforcement, because as we know, most landlords follow the code and do a good job. This leaves all the enforcement pieces in place in the code so that the city can, in fact, make sure that landlords are doing the job that they're supposed to and following the code with the added provisions. That's fine with me. But it also allows the manager to set higher fines for those that don't. And that would be my legislative intent on this. But it simply removes us bickering about it every single year that it comes up with any potential sunset. And with some of the new things we're going to do, I would want to have the sunset if it weren't a part of what the city just does naturally each and every year. So I hope you'll support the amendment with the idea that we can stop arguing about it and do the work, and it'll cost us a great deal less.
I'm starting a second queue. I have George and Alan
Chris.
and Chris. Okay.
And Betty.
And Betty.
Question, is it possible to just suspend a certain section of this ordinance? In other words, rather than eliminating it altogether, just kind of thinking off the top here, can we suspend the fee for a year with the direction to the city manager that an in-depth analysis be done of the costs, the fees that have been collected over the 10-year period, try to figure out some rationale, and maybe come back with recommendations for continue collecting fee, but at a reduced rate, because we have increased over 6,500 units in the 10 years that this has been in effect. Or we can take action at that time to completely eliminate the fee at that point. Would that be a possibility?
Perhaps, let me think. an amendment. You could amend 8.440 to add a section that says, notwithstanding the above, it doesn't apply for a date period. I mean, you could do something along those lines. You'd want to do it separate from the motion that's on the table right now. To amend the current motion would be difficult, particularly on the fly right now. But if you wanted to, I could try to draft a motion for you that would have move to amend section 8.440 and add a provision that says it doesn't apply from, I don't know.
Isn't it add section 7 or section 8 to do that?
It would be an amendment to the ordinance. It would be an addition to the ordinance that amends 8.440 to add basically a time period in which this 8.440 isn't in place. That's.
But I would say, I'm not sure how that works for suspension. I think it's important also to note that we are actually engaging in that fee review already as part of what the Housing and Policy Board has also suggested and recommended. So we will be engaging in that anyhow. So that will be a part of that. And then just as you have your conversation, there's a couple other pieces I think that are important to keep in mind. The intent of the program has always been to pay for itself and not actually have it as a general fund program. And so I think what this would do is make it a general fund budget item of probably at least $200,000+ a year. The comment about half of the calls are spent on billing questions, it's actually not half. It actually is substantially less than that. And we can address that. So that would be part of that as well. And so if we choose to eliminate the fee, what we'll need to do if we want to continue the program is we'll have that as a budget item as part of your next year's budget conversation for the use of some of our ongoing general fund. And so that'll be part of it.
Yeah. Well, my intent is, it's obvious that this ordinance is going to be around. So my intent is, I don't want to go away with any possibility of funding, having it being self-funded, but there's a difference between self-funded and having an exorbitant amount of excess funds. And, we've been operating this for 10 years, and I know I've asked the question about, is it possible to lower the per unit fee that we've been charging? And finally, I guess we're starting to take some action. So I don't know if I can support Mike's motion because I don't want to totally get rid of the possibility of any fee at this time. In another year, we may look at this when you come back and realize that, yeah, we can do this through general fund. I don't know. So I just.
So one of the, part of our intent is to have that 3-year review to come back to the council. It could be possible that we have an interim review prior to that is specifically around, as we finish up the fee conversation, we can come back to the council. At that time, it gets all laid out, and then you also can choose to do something with that around the fee, which is different than the entire ordinance sort of comes up because, but that's our intent, is to have that 3-year review around the ordinance and can be a part of the fee as well.
Well, then I think and I've got 2 proposed motions also, so I might want a third one. I don't think at this point I'm ready to support Mike's motion, but I think what I want to do is put a motion out either at the end of this discussion about this to direct the city manager to come back to us as soon as he can, within a year, with an in-depth what the Housing Policy Board has recommended, that you do an in-depth review of the fees, the costs, and everything, come back to us. I would like to see it done within 3 months, but I don't know what the staff workload is like, so I'm willing to give it a year's time. So I think once this conversation is over, I think I will want to put that motion out, because I think waiting another 3 years before we look at the cost and the fees is way too long at this point.
Okay, Alan.
Yeah, my thought about the surplus is because we're not doing enough outreach. Over and over, I've heard that people just don't know about the program, especially the students at the U of O, which I represent. And but we'll soon be dealing with that issue. In fact, we already hired an outreach coordinator, and maybe Mr. City Manager can have someone come up and talk about that. And my understanding is that that will draw down the surplus over time and also balance out the budget in terms of annual expenditures.
I'll let Rochelle come up and speak more specifically to that. Oh, and Denny and Laura.
Everybody. Come on, Lori.
Hey, I didn't do this, brother. Simple motion. I thought it was a no-brainer.
Okay. Hi, I'm Laura Hammond. I'm a communications and policy analyst with the Planning Development Department. And just to follow up on your comment around the outreach, yes, we've heard clearly there needs to be a bigger investment in our outreach efforts. And to that end, we have hired a communications coordinator. She started in December, so we're getting her up to speed and have been really looking forward to rolling out a pretty detailed plan about how we'll be doing that outreach in the next year, taking a page from programs that we know have been successful in this area, looking at partnerships in the community that already work with these groups that we can also partner with, and explore opportunities to use existing events, either in neighborhoods, possibly sponsoring some events, working with our fair housing program because they're working with some of the same groups that we're trying to reach, and just raising the profile of the program overall, primarily through probably a very targeted media and marketing campaign that we'd be launching probably in the next few months. So those are all plans that are in the works, and we're looking forward to moving forward with that.
And maybe you could borrow Park and Rec's little.
Yeah, we'll
have that
borrow the bus. That'd be great.
So the intent of that program is to get more outreach, to get more people in understanding the program, and to overcome that barrier that people just don't know about it.
Correct. Yeah, we feel like there are definitely some geographic areas specifically where we see a high number of rental units but fairly low participation in the program, and so those would be some areas we'd probably focus on, as well as some specific demographics that we know that are harder to reach or might be more transient, like students, seniors, and folks that speak other languages.
Right. Problem with students is they only stay here a certain period of time
Right.
and they're gone. So you have to keep re-educating the new ones every year because you got a whole new slew of them. And I suspect the Western University neighborhood is one of the neighborhoods you're talking about. And what does it do to the budget and the expenditures and the surplus?
How this all relates to the budget, and I'll kind of give you a general overview. About 10% of the budget is spent on billing. We have that pretty much down pat, so the billing part of it isn't a huge part of the overall budget. About 30% of the revenue really is targeted to maintaining the database, and that's complicated. There's 35,000 rental units, and that's a fluid thing that's always changing. They're adding, coming off, and so we have to be able to maintain that database, and that's pretty labor intensive. So about 30% of the revenue is utilized for that, and the database is actually used by the others in the city. The police department we use it for nuisance complaints and those kinds of things. So it has some value beyond the program. We're targeting about 15% of the revenue, the budget, to be focused on outreach, and that's something, of course, we've heard. And of course, with some additional standards added and more outreach, as you've mentioned, we expect the caseload to go up. But our long-term outcome really is to have this balance between revenue and expenditures where we have broad outreach. We still have a local program that renters can utilize. And because there's more awareness and education, we actually reduce the number of cases over time. So we create more of a preventative environment through education and outreach and so forth. So that's kind of how it ties to the budget.
Can you address the issue that some people didn't do the math wrong, but they used, I think, the wrong assumptions and had some number like $6 million per phone call, whatever it was. You sent out a two-pager about that, and that the number of calls we get actually is substantially higher. It's not the number of formal complaints. If you don't get a complaint, that's a success. That's actually what we're trying to do. So it's the number of calls, not the number of final complaints. If we had 0 final complaints, the cost of this program would be infinite. And that would be the goal, but we're not going to get there. But maybe you can address that issue.
Yeah, so we do get a fair number of calls, and the math's out there for trying to divide that, but I don't think that's accurate. We do daily a lot of mediation on the phone, and our goal is not to have city involvement in these. And so when calls come in and there's an issue, our starting point is if the tenant's okay with it, if they haven't put it in writing, if they're okay with it, we call the owner, we call the property manager, we have a conversation and we say, are you aware this is happening? And that way, maybe the tenant doesn't even have to go further than that, and we never see a formal complaint. And that's our goal. The goal is to ensure that the needs are getting addressed for tenants, and we minimize the amount of time that we have to go out. We may never have to go out in the field at that point. And so that's a success.
And the number of calls you receive is what, 550 a year?
We get about 500 calls for tenants. There's a larger number from tenants. Yeah, so that math doesn't work out very well. We don't get a lot of calls from owners, but the ones that we do are not just paying bills. They're asking for resources as well. The other day we had one that came in that wasn't aware of the Chapter 90 statutes. And so we're providing those kinds of resources to not only tenants, but also property owners.
And specifically to the motion, right now it's a standalone program, self-funded. Actually, contrary, I don't understand some of the landlords' issues with this. The money gets flowed through to the tenants, so they're actually paying it, not the landlords. So putting this in the general fund means that we'll have to cut something else, since this is probably going into a budget process with reductions in it. At least at the state level, we've got a $1.8 billion deficit that they're coming, and we're probably going to see some ramifications of that. So we're going to be dealing with that. And we haven't seen the final budget assessment this year. But I guess, Mike, what would you cut? $200,000 is a large amount of money. I mean, we could look at the things that we most recently added, like the Cahoots van, library hours, Parks and Rec, or something like that. And so putting this back into the general fund and taking it away from a standalone self-funded program, maybe you can address that. And if in the general fund it continually is at risk at that volatile budget. And so that makes this program always being, instead of being dealt with on its own, dealt with everything else within the budget. And then finally, I guess the fee part, can you talk about the timeline and exactly what we're going to be doing on looking at the fee and how that's going to play out?
I'll turn again to Denny and his team on addressing that process.
Well, as far as what's included in the motion, we're proposing a city manager review process. And I think, again, just thinking about a longer term perspective, I think if you look at the program, especially with more coordinated outreach and more standards, that it's going to become more normalized over the next 2 or 3 years as far as revenue and expenditures. That's what our forecast would project. So what's proposed is that there would be a city manager review process, and that we come back to council and look at the outcomes, how the program performing, look at revenue, look at expenditures. I think if we did that today, it's a little bit problematic because we haven't done all the outreach yet. We haven't really applied these new standards. So we can't answer with specification as far as how exactly what the fee should be given where we're heading with this program with these changes. So I think the proposal really is over time we would come back and update the council on how it's performing, looking at outcomes, cases, revenue, expenditures, all of those things.
But faster than the Section 5 requirement that every 3 years you come back and report back to council about how it's working?
Yeah, I think what we'd want to do, and I heard George and others, I think what we'd want to do is try to do the best financial forecast given some basic assumptions around revenues, expenses, and services that we want to provide it to include the outreach. We've heard that. And so we can come back and do that kind of forecasting for the council and come back sooner than the 3 years on that. And that's what I'm suggesting, because I understand the energy around that. So we're not trying to postpone that, and it's an important part of it. And we'll work with the Housing Policy Board, who I think provides some of that advice and guidance and a sounding board as we move forward, and has the opportunity to weigh in on what's reasonable or not when we think about the fee and the services. And so our intent will be to accelerate that portion of the review and move forward, come back to council with that.
Good to hear. And good to hear that the budget's going to be balanced and the surplus is going to go away.
Okay, Chris?
Thank you. You have studied this program in other cities, right? I think I recall you've looked at several other cities. How many of those other cities have this program as part of their general fund?
None of them that I'm aware of. Portland, Gresham, Corvallis all have a fee.
Have a per door fee. Just as a sideline, how many of those programs have a sunset date and how many are permanent?
None of them that I'm aware of. Corvallis actually removed their sunset after the first review. So.
This actually parallels a lot of conversation that went on at the Housing Policy Board, particularly in terms of not only the provisions, but also the fee. I know I brought it up at the Housing Policy Board, and that's why they took another look at it. And I think I have heard loud and clear, and I'm sure the city manager has, that there is some concern about the fee that was being charged and how it's being used. And I'm very pleased to hear not only is there a review process going on, and it's going to be formalized, but also a strategy for how we can take advantage of the way the program operates to provide a lot more outreach and operational improvement. That's another thing I heard loud and clear is the program's been chugging along, doing its job pretty well, but there's opportunities we can do to make the program even better. Not only better in terms of how it functions and how it communicates, but also better in terms of the budget versus the fee that's charged. And I think we heard that loud and clear. And I think having a review built into this and say, no, we really have to look at it, and using your Housing Policy Board, which is great in that it includes both users and landlords, as a group that reviews this, I think is really a good body to deep dive into this and then bring back the recommendations. So I think the sense that we have heard what needs to be done with the program in order to begin to make it better, and having reviews regularly so that we can continue to make improvements and see what needs to be done, I think satisfies my need to make sure that the program stays on track. I brought up this fee issue in the very first conversation. And I think the consistency and the frequency with which we've talked about it has gotten that message through. With regard to the issue of bringing it back into the general fund, there have been a couple of times where we have brought programs that were funded externally into the general fund, albeit during the same time as a recession, so I won't say it was entirely as a result of that. That did create some difficulties during the budget conversations, because suddenly our general fund expenditures increase without the kind of revenue to compensate. And so if this program can be made to run efficiently, effectively, and with effective monitoring and oversight, I'm reluctant to bring it back into the general fund. Fix it, don't dump it, I think would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Betty?
Thank you. We're still discussing Mike's motion, right?
We're still discussing Mike's. Yes.
Okay, just two things about that. First, I think the fee is almost ridiculously low if you compare it to places in other parts of the country, and I think it's so small, I don't know why anyone's complaining about it. The other thing is I remember when we abolished the program previously. I don't know how many people remember that, but after Measure 5, it was in the general fund. And that was one of the first budget cutting things that happened. The program was abolished. And it was a tougher one than we have now, I think. It was, one aspect of it was, we don't need to discuss that right now, but it was a really tough, it was really tough on landlords if they didn't do the right thing. And so I think it's a big mistake to abolish it. I have to put it in the general fund because it would be abolished probably. And that's all I have to say.
Right. Emily?
I think this is really an essential service. I think it's something the city should provide. I would like to see the fund not be on the landlords. I think that gives us a bit of a compromise from their concerns, and it would eliminate the time to administer that, which is less than I first understood. The high price per incident, now that I understand there's so many calls that don't actually go to an incident, it seems more effective. This helps the city as a whole because it gives us better rentals. With all those people coming, will help house them. So I think that's a good idea. We totally need that outreach, and I think that's essential for the success of this program. We could start with the excess money we have now. I would like to see it reviewed really often, at least in the beginning. The reason I was in favor of keeping the sunset is because we're making this change for the outreach, which I think is critical, and I want to be able to review that by the whole council. So I'm in agreement that it would be good to have a full review of this sooner. As far as the general fund, I think this isn't a huge line item, although I certainly wouldn't want to take money from rest stops or Cahoots. But I do remember that we started having a marijuana tax, and the low end of that was $200,000 up to $600,000. We did not designate, to my remembrance of it, to go to general fund, or those three things?
Designate the money. We designate it for programs.
Well, I've also been told the council can change things pretty much whenever they want. And I think that this is an opportunity to provide a really good service that will improve quality of life for everybody. And I would like to give the landlords a break. I think the fee is so low that it's really not worth the administration. And it is paid by the tenants, which if I was the tenant, $10 a year for this protection isn't very much. But I think it's really important. I'd like us to see the money for funding it. If it goes away, maybe we could make it self-funded again.
Thank you. I'm just going to interject.
Can I get in the queue, Mayor?
Oh, yeah, you're on. In fact, go for it.
Thank you. So I'm not going to support Councilor Clark's motion. I agree with what Councilor Taylor said about the vulnerability of a program like this if we move it into our general fund. I look forward to Councilor Polling's motion. My preference would be to have the city manager conduct a review of the fee and the fine structure. We should not have a big pile of money sitting there without knowing, what the plan is for spending it. We should be spending it to promote the program and other aspects that staff has referred to. And when we get to the point of discussion around the sunset date, at this point, I think it's time to make this a permanent program. We've got a 3-year review built into the ordinance. And I hear the city manager acknowledging that we want a review of this fee and that he plans to do that, though I would also support a motion to direct him in that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I want to point out the time that we have 2, possibly 3 more motions to discuss, and it is 10:01. So Mike has asked for a second round. I'm going to give him that, but I'm then thinking that we have the sense of where we're going on this, and we can go on to the next thing.
Thank you, Mayor. I can count, but I will tell you that I agree with what I have heard both Claire and several others say, and I said it at first, which is that, and to Alan's question about priorities, this compared to another budget item, I would find this more important than a whole host of city services. This is a kind of basic protection that the city can offer in its enforcement of making sure that, in many cases, those who are renting, more vulnerable populations are being treated fairly and have some avenue for justice. I consider that a basic level of city service, a more core item. So it begs the question, why are we making renters pay for a basic service? If it's a city priority, why shouldn't it be prioritized in the general fund? How can we say that something we think is important and a city priority and a good thing for us to do and a high level of service for the people it serves, traditionally those who rent are more economically challenged, and at the same time we're making them pay for it? We're saying we're going to charge there aren't any landlords who pay this and don't charge it through on the rent. I mean, we all know that. So you're making renters pay for a basic level of city service rather than putting it in the city budget. Should it compete? Yeah, it should, but my guess is it would compete and not be lost because we're all saying it's something of a higher priority, and I can say it would be for me. But I would ask us to check our priorities, I guess, on that. There is also the notion, as Emily brought up, that we do have some unanticipated ongoing revenues, not one time. Everything I've read at the state level and from other states is that the level of revenues coming in from marijuana taxes have outpaced what was expected. Has anybody heard that they've dropped significantly below what was expected? I haven't seen that anywhere. I've seen at the state level here much higher than expected. So we're going to have unanticipated revenue at the city level to pay for this with, and we can give people who rent a break. That's why I thought it was a good idea, make it more permanent and give people that rent a break.
Okay, I think we are ready for a vote. All in favor of Mike's motion to eliminate the $10 fee?
Oh, no.
Three in favor.
Almost got you there, didn't I,
Three in
Becky?
favor.
Had you ready to go to church.
And all opposed? Claire?
I vote no.
Okay, 3 in favor, 5 opposed, it fails. Okay. Now, we're back to the original motion, and I have in the queue Betty.
Thank you. And I won't say a lot. I'll just say I'm really glad that I think it's really important to review this, and I'm really glad that we're probably going to eliminate the sunset, because it is the people who are most vulnerable and most transient who have to come back and defend it every time if we have the sunset. And I think and as far while I'm talking, I don't believe that all landlords pass this measly $10 on to their tenants. I know some who pay it and don't mind at all. Thank you.
Thank you. George.
Thank you. Yes, I've got 2 proposed motions, and the first one deals with the repairs and the time needed for repairs. And in real life, sometimes you can't do the repairs in a specific amount of time because parts aren't available, workers get sick, the landlord's not authorized to do the work, and the weather is such that, for example, your furnace goes out. Furnace people sometimes are really busy during cold weather. So I'm hoping that the maker of the motion will accept this proposed amendment as a friendly, and that is, I move to amend Section 3 of the ordinance to revise subsection 5A, 4A of EC 8.430 so that it reads as follows. Repairs are needed to remedy the lack of essential services. Upon making this determination, the city manager shall fix a deadline for completing the repairs that is reasonable in the circumstances and is within 48 hours from issuance of the notice and order. However, if the city manager determines that the repairs cannot be completed within 48 hours, the owner or owner's agent shall, within 48 hours, submit a compliance schedule acceptable to the city.
Second.
So that was made as a friendly.
It was made as a friendly first. That's why it is.
Made as friendly, so it doesn't need to be accepted.
So
if it's accepted by the maker.
It was declined.
No, I won't accept it as a friendly.
Okay, so now it's being made as a regular motion with a
It
second.
is a motion and
So
second.
now it is motion, and now it's seconded, and now the floor is open to discussion.
Well, I think I still have a couple of minutes left.
sorry.
I just think that with the wording change, it's not that much wording change as what was proposed. It just allows the landlords more time in the event that there are exigent circumstances to address a repair issue that unexpectedly comes up. And working with the city manager, and I'm assuming the rental housing code enforcement staff, some sort of a schedule can be set up. And that might mean the landlord comes in, says, look, I had to order this part from Portland and it's not going to be here for 7 days. And it's the only place I can get it. Or I've contacted X, Y, and Z furnace companies and they're all booked up until 3 days from now. And that's all I'm looking for is some sort of protection to the landlord that's saying, I'm working on trying to get the repair done, but I've got a problem. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, discussion. I have Alan, Mike, and then Emily, and then Greg.
So I think that's a reasonable assumption. Another circumstance would come up just recently during the ice storm. Trees went through power line above my house on Floral Hill, and those people were out of power for a week. And if you had electric heat, you weren't going to be able to get that fixed no matter how much infinite power the city manager had to say that it shall happen. So, Mr. City Manager, what's your thought about this language, and how would it gives you a little bit more discretion as opposed to the existing language as written, and if this doesn't pass, how would you have interpreted that? Because this is but be no more than 48 hours that you have to repair it.
So first of all, we don't have any concern with this particular language. In some ways, it could add flexibility. We do understand that the intent of this portion of the ordinance is that there are certain kinds of things that need to be mitigated very quickly. So the intent is, in fact, to try to have those repaired within the 48 hours. And so we would see this as exceptions to the rule as opposed to a matter of common course that a landlord just, for whatever reason, wants to extend the schedule. And so I think from our perspective, it does add flexibility, and I can let Rochelle or somebody else talk in more detail if you would like.
Yeah, I can add to that. So the language that's already in there actually allows that. It's the same language that allows us to do that with the 10-day period. And so we do that often with the 10-day requirement. They can do a compliance schedule within that 10 days, and we'll allow flexibility, which is why our civil penalties are so low, because we work with the property owners to get to resolution. And there are often times that they can't get a contractor out or whatever the situation is.
So you already do this in practice.
We do.
And it's within the, but I don't have a problem with the motion. I'll support it.
All right. Emily. No, Mike, I'm sorry.
I'm in favor. I pass.
I think that because not very many of the complaints and issues get to this point where the city manager has to get involved with it, that I'm okay with it. I also, again, think it would be a way to reach out to the landlords who are upset about this, and it doesn't sound to me like it would really delay any repairs.
Okay, Greg?
Yeah, I'm kind of ditto on this too. Will point out that, years ago when I was a renter, I did have a situation in a bathroom where significant repairs needed to be made. My landlord was in Mexico, lived in Mexico. And so first contacting the landlord to get the repairs done was a task. And then, the landlord responded, but it was difficult in getting a contractor in a very timely fashion to do that, even though the landlord's intent was to fix the defect in the bathroom. So, I support the motion and seconded it because I think that level of flexibility needs to be accommodated to, landlords who are trying to do the right thing and make sure that their properties are up to code and in appropriate working order for their tenants.
Any other, Betty?
It sounds to me as if the motion is unnecessary. Isn't that true? Since there's already flexibility, and I don't like voting for laws that are unnecessary.
Well, it's amending new language. The flexibility that Rochelle was speaking to was based on the old code. There is new language that's a part of this ordinance that adds a shall. And so this, I wouldn't say it's unnecessary. It adds in that level of discretion to your newer language that has a shall in it.
Okay, I can imagine everyone calling the city manager. I think that'll be a lot of fun if they say, John Reese, would you do something about this?
He's good at delegating.
I'll be on speed dial, I'm sure.
You already are.
Okay, that's right.
Okay, are we ready? Everybody ready for a vote? So all in favor of George Polling's proposed motion to change the language around timing, all in favor? Claire?
I vote yes.
All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you, that's great. And so now we are again back to the original motion. And the next person, nope.
You still had
Or
time.
you still have time? Oh, you still have time. Okay, thank you. You still have time.
Yeah,
Got
I'll
it.
go ahead and put the motion out, and then if I get a second, I'll speak to it. I move to amend finding C in section 4 of the ordinance to provide for a sunset date of April 30, 2020, so that those sections read as follows. Finding C, the council has determined that the rental housing code sunset date should be extended to April 30, 2020, and that revisions recommended by the Housing Policy Board be incorporated into the rental housing code. Section 4, unless otherwise extended by action of the City Council, the sunset date and repeal of ordinance numbers 2329, 2408, 2480, 2494, 2568, and this ordinance is April 30, 2020, and B, to delete section 5 of the ordinance.
Second.
Thank you. Real quick, the reason why I would like to leave the sunset in is because the proposed ordinance has a review period of 3 years by the city manager to bring it forth to the council. By keeping the sunset in, it's going to require a public hearing, public input on this. And I think that as much conversation as this ordinance has created, that it's important to involve the public in that, and then public hearing is the best way to do it. And I think we need to continue reviewing the program every few years and to determine whether or not it's working. If not, what part of it's aren't working so we can fix it. It can be taken to a public hearing for public input. And I just think that, maybe in the future it won't be needed. I don't know. But at this point, I think we need to keep the sunset in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Next in the queue, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry for the coughing. I have medicine now. Thank you, George. I would agree that it's necessary to keep a sunset in here, and here's why. All the arguments we've heard about why not to make it a regular part of the city were all about the new things that we're going to be doing, or a lot of them were, to make it better. Now, some of those have been a part of the review that went before a public hearing just recently, but some of them have not. And some of them we don't know the answer to, as Denny just got done mentioning. The idea that we're going to have outreach, and we're going to have new standards, and we're going to have a new communications plan, and then we're going to see, what new level of service has been demanded of us after that. At the level of service that's demanded now, I would argue that the newspaper was right. The Register Guard was right that It's not serving a lot of people, but I would probably still vote to keep it because I think it's a good thing to have for those few people. It's arguable. But the larger point is that the newspaper weighed in on it. And to the degree that an issue is of substantial community interest to the point where the Guard writes an editorial about it, is to me indicative of an issue that if we're going to make a substantive decision on, should go before the public, should have a public hearing so that people can weigh in on it if it is of significant community interest to rise to that level. And so now that we're going to make all these new changes and we're going to do this new outreach campaign, I don't think it's unreasonable to say, let's leave the sunset so that the whole thing comes back to a public hearing and everybody gets to talk and weigh in on it before we decide to make it permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
The purpose of the sunset is to review the program and make it better or modify it to fix problems. And so we absolutely do not need a sunset to do that. The council can do that. And in fact, we have that already built into it in section 5, which gets deleted by this motion, to come back in 3 years and do a formal review of it. We can also do that faster than that. And I think the intent is to do that faster in terms of the fee and the outreach. Is there a possibility of getting a more firm deadline on coming back to us on those two issues?
I think
put that in motion.
George, Catherine, send a motion to George to do that. So I'll let him make his motions when he's ready to do that.
To do
for us to come back and
with a date certain.
Date certain
on those
for a
two
review
items.
of the fee.
Good. I'd support that. Actually, I think the RG's editorial was actually very misinformed about the math. If they had had this other two-page memo, I think they would have not written the editorial they had. The number of 550 tenant calls and all the mediation that occurs and all the things that occur, besides the fact that we heard from John Van Landingham during public testimony that while there are state laws, there's no enforcement mechanism, there's no place to call, there's nothing that people will do if you call the state and complain. The reason all these cities have these programs is because there is no state mechanisms. Getting rid of the program and all that stuff makes it wouldn't happen. And so keeping the program and making it permanent, like every other city who has this program. There are no sunset laws in any program that has, any city that has a program on a rental housing code in the state. We're the only ones with a sunset. So I think it's we've done it in 2004. We created it. And then in 2008, 2012, and 2016. This is another time we're looking at the sunset. I think it's about time to make this permanent. It's shown its worth. It's shown its need, and we can do everything we want to do, including the reviews and the changes and the public input, without having a sunset be in the mechanism. Is there anybody at the table that thinks if we have this on our agenda that we're not going to hear from the public about it? I kind of doubt it. It does have a lot of energy around it. So I'm not worried about the fact that we're not going to have public input on this process. Beside that, the Housing Policy Board is another public forum for discussing these issues, and when it comes back to council for these reports, hopefully will be coming fairly soon, will be another opportunity for people to weigh in. So the sunset's not necessary to do all the things that we want to do with this program and make it better and more cost effective.
Thank you. Greg?
I think I'll pass, Mayor.
Betty?
Thank you. This was started because of mainly students who worked really hard on all of us individually and as a group and did a lot of research. And those people mostly have gone on to some other place, as students do. They graduate and go away. They also have jobs. They don't have time to spend full time working to keep something that they work so hard to get in the first place. And it isn't right that people should have that, as Mike has said, the people who, many of whom are the more vulnerable, not all of them, they're wealthy renters too, but who are more vulnerable, who are really busy with either school or work, to ask them to spend their time watching to keep a protection like this is not right. There are other people who, the landlords organizations have paid people, I think they're paid, they might argue with me, but anyway, people who have the time to watch and stand up for their rights. These people, and as has been pointed out, we don't need a sunset to change it if we need to. We could wipe, a majority of council could wipe the thing out anytime if they want to. But it is not right that we have to, that we say it will end unless we reinstate it. It just isn't the right thing to do. It isn't right to the people who don't have the time. People are working 2 jobs and a lot of renters. And people are going to school and working, and they don't have time to watch the government all the time to stand up for their rights, I think. And I just think it would be really, I thought it was wrong to have a sunset the first time. And I think it's really ridiculous to keep having it. It's like saying, if you don't watch, we'll take this away from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris.
Interestingly, in the middle of this conversation, I'm thinking, wow, we're in a really good place. And the reason we're in a really good place is we are affirming that we want these protections in place. And now the discussion is, do we want them in place permanently or do we want them in place for 3 years? And frankly, I'm okay either way, as long as the protections are in place. So that's why I'm in a good place. I'm happy that we've affirmed we want to have them. And if we want to say, yeah, we want to review it in 3 years, I can live with that. If we want to make it permanent, I can live with that too, because I think after 4 previous renewals, we've pretty much reaffirmed we like this program and we think it's doing a good job. And if a 3-year review gives us the opportunity to do a more diligent job of tweaking it, okay, I think the review we would have in 3 years would also do that. But it's going to be a matter of what our perspective is and what our wants are. But I'm glad we've reached a place where our biggest debate at this point is whether to have a sunset date or not, because that's a good thing for protecting renters in this community, and I think that's a good thing. Personally, I will probably parallel the conversations that went on at the Housing Policy Board. Their first recommendation through a subcommittee of tenants and landlords was kind of a compromise position, which was put the sunset in, keep it there as a good faith gesture, if nothing else. Subsequent conversation by the Housing Policy Board, I think, came to the conclusion, is that really necessary if it's a program that's working, it's been renewed 4 times, do we really need to do that? It was an expediency, I think, kind of choice. So even the Housing Policy Board has been, you know, of a dual mind on what to do with this. But I think the Housing Policy Board itself, like this council, is adamant these protections need to be in place. And so from that standpoint, I'll be happy with whatever we come up with.
Thank you. Emily?
I want us to have this. I think it's really important. I'm not sure that it's good enough, though. If it was good enough in the past, why was the sunset continued? One of the advantages of the sunset is that the pressure is going to be on to really make it work. I think, you know, if one more sunset after this is ridiculous. I think we really need to push to get the students to know about it, and if it's going to sunset, that's more pressure. I also have a little bit of problem with saying, oh, the students are too busy. If this was so important for students to get it here in the first place, it should be important enough for them to pass the information on. They certainly have the ability to do that. If beer was going to be given out on Kincaid at 5:15 every afternoon, the street would be packed by 5:20 the first day. So I have a problem with saying that the students don't have the ability to get this information to each other. I definitely want a review. I want it to be a strong review. I want this to succeed. And if it's not succeeding, let's do something better.
Claire, do you have any comment?
Sure. So, I mean, I can understand Councilor Pryor's position. I have some empathy with I could go either way on this, but I feel like I agree more with Councilor Taylor, and I'll just point out she wasn't actually referring just to students in terms of people not having the time. She was referring to low-income renters as well, to monitor what we're doing around this program. So at this point, I'm in favor of of removing the sunset date and relying on the city manager to come back to us in 3 years or sooner, if we pass a motion to that effect, to give us an update on what he's done around the fee, around outreach, and the effectiveness of the program.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? Emily?
If we get rid of the sunset, I'd really like us to have a review in 1 year to see how this outreach is working.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. So all in favor of the motion on the table to retain the sunset clause in the new rendering housing code? All in favor of retaining the sunset? 1, 2, 3. Claire?
I vote no.
3 in favor. All opposed? 5 opposed. Okay, it fails. Okay. Now, we are back to the original motion again, and I have Alan in the queue.
So can somebody address, George, are you going to put another motion about?
Oh, yeah.
That was what my.
Can I do that now, or should I wait until after the motion is? We do.
Are you back in the?
We've got a motion.
Back in the original, we're back to the main
Yes,
question.
it needs to be an amendment.
Yes, it has to be an amendment. You could,
This is,
That's not an amendment.
this is.
no, it's not an amendment. I apologize. It's a standalone
That's why I
motion.
said I do it after the,
Yes.
So
So many.
we have to vote on the main motion
Doesn't
before I
change
can.
let's vote on the main motion first.
This does not.
I'm good.
Manager direction?
I'll wait for that motion. I agree that we need to do that sooner than later.
Wait a second, now I'm confused.
So go ahead and
that's
vote on
after.
the main motion.
It's a separate
We are
motion.
voting on the main motion, okay, and so
I'm done.
you're done. I have Chris in the.
I said it actually.
You're done. Any other comments, George?
I'm going to vote against the main motion. It's not necessarily that I either in favor or opposed to the rental housing code. It's just that without the sunset in it, I can't support moving forward.
Mike?
And as someone who's had their votes characterized differently than I intended them, I would like to make sure that I say when I vote no here, it is strictly because everyone has talked, and some more than others, about the importance of alleviating the burden on those least able to take care of it, but they don't mind charging them to do it. And I think it's a mistake. I think it's a value for the whole city that we help those in most need and not charge just them. So I'm against that as a notion, so I'll be voting against it.
Any other comments? We are ready for a vote on the main motion. So all in favor of, now this would be the amended motion, the motion as amended. Is everyone's clear on what that
And the
is?
only amendment was the time frame.
Time frame. Okay. All in favor of the motion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Claire?
I vote yes.
6 in favor. All opposed? 2. Okay, it passes. Thank you. Congratulations. Okay, now we have one more.
Yes, and this is in reference to the fees and the financial overlook of the program. And as I move to direct the city manager to return to council with an in-depth financial review and analysis of the rental housing code program, including fees charged and city operating costs by February 1, 2018, and to schedule a public hearing for council to receive public comment on the program after the financial review.
Second.
Discussion. Any discussion? You have, okay.
City manager, that's all doable.
Yes, I will make it a priority to do it. I think it's yes, we'll just leave it at that.
All right, Betty.
I don't see the need for it, not that soon, and I don't see the need for a public hearing. People can always come to a public forum and talk about it if they want to. Thank you. So I'll vote against this.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of the George Polling's amendment on financial, no, just a motion, sorry, financial review. All in favor? Claire?
I vote yes.
7 in favor, opposed, 1. So it passes. Thank you. Thank you. That was great. It was great.
Well, true.
Have we left?
We have 10 minutes left, and we'll see.
We got oil trains.
We have oil trains. 10 minutes to do oil trains.
No, we don't.
Should be easy.
You know what I would suggest, Mayor, rather than me reading some things, people probably read into, in the interest of time, just maybe get into the discussion of the resolution. Would that be?
Yeah, that
be
makes,
okay?
that makes total sense. So we'll just, opening the floor for discussion on the resolution. Do we need to have it, has everyone read it, or?
It's the one that was placed at your, it was emailed out to you. It's a replacement to your packet and was at your desk.
That'd be in the queue, please, Mayor.
I know. So just for purposes of making sure everyone's got the right one in front of you, Section 3 is going to include, it has a section that directs the city manager to send a letter to the senators. That should be the one that you are considering and discussing
I don't have that.
tonight. You do not.
Is that your place?
That should be.
Yeah.
There we go.
I don't know that it is.
There we go. Is everybody, so we're looking at Section 3, everybody? Okay.
So I move to adopt Resolution 5181, opposing transportation of oil by rail through the city of Eugene.
Second by roll.
All, discussion? Mike, Alan, George?
Can I be in the queue, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm wondering why we're singling out this one thing other than it's chic and in the news these days. There's certainly not the most dangerous thing that's transported by rail. We transport chlorine through the community by rail, which, by the way, if one of those tipped over, you want to talk about a problem. You want to talk about an explosive, awful situation. And that's not even the worst things that get transported by rail through our community. Why are we making a list of one item when there's such a big list? Other than it's kind of chic and politically correct and in the news. I don't understand the purpose of taking time to do this sort of thing when it certainly doesn't address the issue of safety. This is addressing the issue of getting in the news. So I don't like the fact that we have only 6 minutes to talk about this and that it's not something that's substantive. If the issue were genuinely, let's make sure to the degree that we can that things that travel through our community do so safely. Well, then there's the issue of I-5. And we're no more able to say we only want blue cars and trucks to travel through our community on I-5 than we are to decide what goes through on rail. So we can begin to do some of these things around what the manager, who we can communicate with about safety, and there are some things we can do to minimize a potential spill or accident and their impacts. But this is by no means a resolution that deals with safety. This is just one item. So if you want to come back and talk about how do we keep our community safe from any potential issues and hazards that may go through on rail, I'd be really in favor of that. I do, but other than that, I think this is a waste of time. Thank you.
Alan?
I think it is clear the place of the council to comment on issues that affect our community health and well-being. Oil trains are dangerous, and a good example is what happened in Mosier, and the blast radius for an explosion from an oil train is half mile to a mile. And we actually had a Eugene spill here, and maybe the chief can come up and talk about the preparedness that we have and the ability to deal with them. My understanding is you can't do anything about it. You just let them burn. And all those toxins that go into the air, a lot of them disperse, but a lot of them stay locally. But there's also the spill aspects of it. And these trains are huge.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The statement of that they are huge and we have to wait for them to burn is an accurate statement. We do have safety mechanisms in place that include additional foam units and that support our operation. They are one locally and two that are about an hour's drive away for a total of 3, 4, if you include one near the airport. So we do have foam capabilities close by to assist, but the reality is those resources are put in place to confirm evacuation, to make sure everybody we can is safe and evacuated. And then there is a time period that we have to wait for it to burn.
Good. Thank you for saying that. The difference between the two motions, I noticed there's several of them. Section 3, thank you, Chief, was expanded, and then what happened to 4, 5, and 6 in the old one?
Ethan Nelson in Intergovernmental Relations. So the difference was that the one that was sent out incorrectly in council packet and then the one that was amended is that section 3, the amended one, more closely resembles the action items within the coal train resolution from 2012. And so that was, we were looked at that to say, let's make those consistent.
Well, I haven't been the author of that resolution. I think that's great. So I think this is an important thing for us to do, and eager to vote for it.
George.
Yeah, I'm not able to support this resolution for a number of reasons. One, and it was repeated to us many times, or several times rather, by speakers that were actually in favor of the resolution, that the city of Eugene has no control over what the Federal Railroad does. They're going to do whatever they want to do no matter what we do. And we're spending a lot of time on resolutions that may or may not affect us. And to me, this one is one of them, just like the one that we passed in 2011 about the funds going into the war in Afghanistan. And, how much of that money that the resolution said we wanted to get back, how much have we seen? Not a dime. How much quicker did that war end because of our resolution? No quicker. We passed a bunch of resolutions earlier in the meeting that actually had to deal with the day-to-day functions of the city of Eugene. These type of resolutions, the one against the war in Afghanistan, Iraq, the railroad resolution, we can't do anything about it. And the place to have the discussion about the railroads is with the federal government and our federally elected officials, I think I said that right, are working on that. Give them time to work on it. They've started the ball rolling. Our resolution is not going to mean a thing to the railroads. I just think it's a waste of our time.
Claire?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilor Zelinka. There was a horrible and deadly explosion that occurred in a small town in Canada, and a similar thing could occur here. And yes, that put the issue on the front page and brought that danger into the foreground. And it spurred our residents to ask us to take some action. And it's true, we have very limited authority over the workings of the railroad. Please let me finish without interrupting. We can make an emphatic statement about this danger, and that's what this is. And it puts our city in a better position to get some action on the part of those who might have the power to implement change. And I believe that this resolution matters for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to point out that we have 2 minutes left, and if the council is willing, we can propose.
Move to extend the meeting 10 minutes.
We have IGR.
We have a.
After.
Can we postpone the discussion?
Is there a second to?
Okay, I'll second, but I think we can do it faster than that. I think we could just vote.
Well, I want to give 2 more people a chance to talk, and then
1 minute each, maybe.
And then I think everybody should. I think everybody needs to discuss. So if it's not enough time, we can either agree to extend 10 minutes if IGR can withstand that delay. And I'm getting a nod from Ethan. So
Is there a second?
is there a second on the extend? Okay. All in favor of delaying or extending the meeting by 10 minutes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Claire?
I vote yes.
3 members of
Okay.
IGR don't want to.
6. All opposed? 2. Okay, so we will extend. Thank you. Now, Greg.
You know, I've dealt with transportation for a long time, and this is a moral statement on the part of the city. I think there are a lot of the residents are concerned, and particularly in my ward and in Chris's ward, and in fact, all of the wards that we have, you know, train travel coming through, which is the entire city, about the potential dangers of, you know, oil spills, other hazardous chemicals, other hazardous things. No, this is a resolution. It has no weight in power of law, but it does send a message to our federal elected officials and representatives that the city goes on record as having some significant concerns around what does come through our city via rail. And no, we you know, Union Pacific is almost nearly the power of God, okay? And that's the same for the other 4 class 1 railroads in this country moving freight. There's some necessities and some hazards to moving freight. There's no question about that. There's chemicals that are going to come through our communities and communities across the country. What I think this resolution does, it calls attention to the issues of what can happen to human beings and to our environment if the proper measures are not in place to protect our communities. And so if we can send that message to Merkley, Wyden, and DeFazio in an emphatic way from this body, that does resonate with them in terms of what they take before their colleagues in Congress, and it really helps in terms of shaping federal policy. So no, we don't make federal policy, but we have an impact, and we can shape federal policy through, you know, statements like this. And this is what it is. It's a resolution. It does not have the power or weight of law, but it does say that yes, we are concerned. We are wanting our federal officials to take action, and you know, we need to protect our environment and our community and our residents.
And Betty?
Okay, Greg said it very well, so I don't need to say, I agree with him, but we do have influence as a city. We have influence as individuals, but as a city council, we have more influence, and I think it's important for us to use it for a good cause. Thank you.
And I want to add to that I think what we do in Eugene matters. And it's not just symbolic, because it is the weight of city after city after city being concerned about safety that pushes this kind of legislation. So I think we should be proud of our community for people stepping up and asking us to do this work on their behalf, on behalf of safety. So any other comments needing in the queue? All in favor of the proposed resolution on the transport of oil? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Claire?
I vote yes.
6 in favor, opposed? 2.
With the manner. Yes.
Thank you all. It passes, and we are adjourned.